Morning.
Hello.
Hello, can you hear me?
I can, and I can see
Good,
you. This is wonderful.
good.
Excellent. We made it work. So, welcome everyone to the Tea and Tarot show, happening every Tuesday at 8 p.m. Today, I am so utterly excited and privileged to be able to speak with Nick Bantock. Thank you for being here. I've been a fan of your work for a really long time. I had a treasured lover in my past who gave me one of your books, and that started my love affair with your work. So, um, anyway, today we get to talk about the Archeo, which is an oracle deck that you created based on archetypes.
This is true.
Yes. So, I I have the deck. I'm very thankful when I got a copy of that and read through the bits. And I have recently been using it with some of my clients so that I can gain more familiarity with it and begin to work and have that interplay with it, because I read through the book, but nothing beats actually working with it. Can you tell me a little bit about what inspired you to create this deck?
Well, it goes back a long way. I mean, I actually physically creating the book in terms of writing and doing the art took 2 solid years, but it really goes on for probably 15 years before that. When I first started doing workshops, I had an exercise that was in to help people get in contact with certain aspects of their creativity. I'd noticed through doing Griffin and Sabine that there is always some kind of internal push and pull. And by identifying those two characters, in my case, the sort of the extremes of the male-female characters became Griffin and Sabine. But after a while, I started to realize that those are just a few. So in my workshops, I was working with 4 different archetypes, ones that I thought would be fairly easy for people to handle. As it turned out, one of those original 4 was the villain, and it fascinated me how uncomfortable that actually made about 20-25% of people. That it was, they were disturbed by the idea that they had a shadow. They hadn't got to the point where they could see how to use and incorporate that in a non-negative way. So I flipped that to the trickster. So that was the introduction of a 5th character. And then as the years went by, I started to see within myself more and more these various unspoken voices, or voices that had never been handed the microphone and given a chance. So bit by bit, pictures started to develop. And then one day I started to think, well, I need to actually articulate these visually and in terms of word and text. And that was, in a way, the real beginning of the Archeo.
Ah, excellent. Um, uh, Now, when we look at archetypes, a lot of us go back to the Jungian aspects and the ideas of archetypes and understanding of a deeper aspect of ourselves. And you talk about doing the shadow work, which is something that is a very spiritual concept in nearly every cosmology. Um,
Yeah. Well,
so,
I think one of the things about the Jungian notion of archetypes is, and obviously Jung's brilliance and how much he worked with tarot and he struggled to actually understand all of this. But to some extent, the way we have perceived archetypes is that they are preformed. It's something that we share through our subconscious and the collective unconscious through many, many cultures. But the notion is of it has been fixed. To some extent, the warrior is the warrior, and it is already preformed. the idea that struck me when I started to work with these characters is you can actually grow and build them from scratch yourself. You can actually develop these archetypes from ground upwards in terms of what you actually need. What you need in your day-to-day life, but what you also need within your personal mythology. And so by developing and growing them and forming them and getting to know and understand them, it's a weird mix. On the one hand, you're creating them, but on the other, you're listening and trying to establish who they are. It's a sort of it's a two-way process. It's very much like painting. You have to make decisions when you're painting, but there comes a point where you have to listen to what the painting wants. Because if you don't listen, all you're doing is imposing your ego.
Yes, and just like writing as well. That's the process that I feel with writing. Yeah. Now there is the belief that each person has all of these aspects to them. It's just which aspects that we actually allow ourselves to voice and to grow. And so, everybody's a lover and everyone is a fighter at the same time, but many of us just express different aspects of ourselves. So in using your deck, how is it that you, how is it, you said that there were a number of different ways that you had come up with for how to figure out which aspects of yourself that you would want to express?
Well, first of all, I'd like to say that, what we have here are 40 characters. These 40 characters are just the ones that I recognize. Obviously I'm using myself as the guinea pig. So I kept on digging deeper and finding characters and then trying to evolve them and bring them out. But I think what will happen for most people is that they will instantly recognize certain characters. Other characters they will half recognize. I know that, but I don't know it that well. Then there will be other characters who you might go, I haven't got a clue. Maybe they're in there, or maybe they're that character, but they're slightly differently shaped. So I don't recognize them because I don't see them in this form. I mean, the advantage of me doing the drawings and describing them is it is going to give people a leg up, but it's not going to build them, because that would be self-defeating. Each person has to build their own perception of the characters. So you may start off relating to, say, 20 characters. And then after a while, something will occur within your life and you'll just get a glimpse, a recognition. Oh, there's the 21st character. How do I then evolve and develop that? Anyone out there may go well past the 40 that I've come up with. It's not for me to say. What I'm trying to do is to create the tool or the vehicles by which people can start to be aware of the whole village that exists within them. Once you start to accept that these individual characters are not against you, but they're actually for you, they're on your side, but we have to figure out how best to use them. In other words, how best do we use the various parts of ourselves? Most of us put hurdles in front of us and then spend our time climbing over them. If you don't build the hurdles, you don't need to use up the energy climbing over them. And it's the same thing. If you're fighting the characters within you, then they're not helping you. Well, so going back to your question, I know you had a more specific question. What are the various ways in which you can do that? So I've got to here's one very, very simple and practical way of doing it, because I've been talking in sort of semi-therapeutic terms, and I'm sure a lot of people will know the term Gestalt. A Gestalt dialogue is a dialogue between two parts of yourself. and giving it voice. So a classic Gestalt technique would be to have two chairs, two pieces of paper, two pencils, and you'd sit in one chair and write from one character. And when that character's finished writing, you get up, sit in the other chair, pick up the other pen, and write a response, and then develop a dialogue. And by developing the dialogue, you break the loggerheads of non-communication within you. So we often feel two things. I want to be here. I don't want to be there. You know, I like this person. I don't like this person. So rather than staying in that place, let's pull it apart and examine it, not by the I ego examining it, but by letting each of those characters have voice to see who they are and to feed off each other. So in terms of the Archeo, what you could do is go through the cards face up and pick a card that actually feels most like you at the moment. You put it down in front of you, and then you either speak it or you write it down, what you feel that person, that character within you needs to say at this moment. You know, it could be, I'm totally content and happy and I love this licorice. Or it could be, you bastard, how dare, you know, it just let it be without judgment. Then pick a second card that you put down in front of you that feels like is, I hate a lot of this terminology, but who is present within you, you know? And so you put that down and then you speak from that voice. And so you allow that dialogue to go. And it happens very, very quickly that you move out of yourself, your stuck place. This is who I am, fixed. And then when you allow these characters who you've got sitting in front of you to voice, you start to listen and hear things about the parts of yourself that you didn't realize existed. And that's the essence of knowledge and growth.
Have you said that you do workshops with people, and have you done this particular exercise with some of your participants?
I've done this exercise going way back. I started to train many years ago in my late 20s as a psychotherapist, and Gestalt was one of those facilitator styles that was used. So I've used these kind of techniques. You know, there's many ways of doing it. For example, if you're on your own and you're conscious that you have some kind of internal argument, find yourself a room or a corridor and stand at one end and walk from one end to the other, speaking in the voice of one side without interruption. And when you get to the end, turn around and come back and speak from the other voice. You see, and then you go backwards and forwards, each character having a chance to express its point of view without cross-questioning or judgment. It's a basic therapy technique, but it goes beyond therapy. It goes much more to the roots of who we are and how we can discover ourselves.
To finding our authenticity and being able to be in the as you said, present space.
Yeah, rather than being stuck in a state of internal knotted argument, it's just simply a way of getting things up. I mean, I think probably the richest existence you can have is when all of these characters that we carry within us are active, open to speak, not arguing, pulling together, going down the same road. I mean, I talk about the notion of the hero journey. Well, just imagine if on your hero journey, you're not alone, you're not isolated, but you've got all of the parts of you coming together, all doing what they need to do when they need to do it. When you need to have fun, you've got someone making jokes. When you need to fight, you've got someone who's strong and fighting. When you need to be thoughtful and philosophical, you have the sage there. all accessible at all times. And this is not magic. It's just simply the fact that we don't get taught this basic stuff at school.
Absolutely. There's very little actual interaction and getting into the depth of ourselves that we do get taught in school, except through our interaction with other people. I don't know if you can see all of the comments.
No, I can't. No.
Oh, okay. There, people are saying that they would love for you to write an autobiography, and a lot of people are expressing how eloquently and beautifully that you express the ideas that you are bringing to us.
Thank you.
So,
Many years ago, back in the 2000, I did do a book called The Artful Dodger, which is my nearest thing to it's a pictorial autobiography. So I spoke about my art life up until that time, but because my art life was my life, I may not be talking about, what I had for breakfast on any given day or who I had arguments with, but I do talk about the sort of the relationship between my existence and my creative processes. So that book called The Artful Dodger is out there, and you can pick it up, dead cheap for, $10-12 on the used book.
excellent. Yeah, I don't think that I was familiar with that. Going back to the Archeo, one of the things that I love about working with the different archetypes in the book itself. I've been using it with my clients when we do a reading and they have a situation, because I am a full-time tarot reader. When they have a situation that they're wanting to find a way to process through.
Right.
For the reading itself, I will have them go through and choose a card and, understand that, with the idea that that archetype is some part of themselves that they can draw upon to help them to move forward in the situation. And one thing that I found is that, well, first of all, every single time it resonated beautifully with the people that I was working with. But I love how your descriptions in the book are not, how most tarot cards have these are the positive characteristics, these are the negative characteristics. And yours are these very flowery, full descriptions of, of the being itself without judgment, and then a small story about their life. About who they are. I like that.
I joke that I tried to do it like an everyday William Blake.
Yeah.
So going back to what you were saying about picking a specific, asking them to pick a card. Another interesting way of doing it is if you shuffle the cards, but shuffle them face up, not face down, right? So when you shuffle the cards face up, you can't actually register where every card is, not on a conscious level. But on a subconscious level, we're actually much more absorbent. So if we want to inform our intuition, when you shuffle the cards face up, then you turn them over and then you reshuffle them face down. What you're doing is moving from your conscious self to allowing your subconscious sense move further to the fore. So when you stop cutting and shuffling and say this moment, and you say this card, so you put the first card down as representing you, what you're doing is you're allowing your subconscious to choose the card, because on some level your subconscious actually knows which card, but they're probably making a better job of it than you would when you're trying to say, oh, I'd like to be that.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I had not considered that. That's, well, it's interesting because of the work that I do, the idea of not just with your deck, but also with other oracle decks and such. I hadn't considered all of that before. So,
and it's worth playing with, and it's certainly worth allowing your your clients to actually sort of experience that and then get their feedback to see to what extent they feel satisfied or whether they feel maybe cheated that they wanted to pick a specific card. There's a certain degree of release in that because you know you picked it, but you can't be blamed.
Yeah, unless you want to blame your subconscious.
Yeah, well, there you go. That's just a
I
waste
think
of
we do a lot of
energy.
that anyway. Someone says, I think you're breaking my brain. Neon Brave says that. And yeah, people are
In a
responding
good way,
very,
I hope.
yes, I'm sure in a good way. I mean, it's always nice to, look at our paradigms and to begin to unravel some of our old ways of thinking and consider something new. And that's one of the things that I really love about the Archeo, is that it challenges you when you're working with the various and looking at the different aspects to try to understand. Because my first run through, I picked up the book, read through the book, and read each of the archetypes because I wanted to understand all of the different people in there, and I tried to understand what part of myself when that archetype might have been at play, and I tried to like fit the different aspects into different parts of my life to just sort of understand how that comes up.
Well, it's also interesting to, if you can observe in a non-judgmental way, which ones you have resistance to. Because it's quite easy if you're going, well, quite easy, it's not that easy, but if you go, oh yeah, identify with that one. But when there's something like, for example, you may not want the hypocrite to come out because it just feels like, I don't want to be a hypocrite, but that's not the point of the hypocrite. The point of the hypocrite is to actually help you view and see and understand situations where you are either faced with something that is hypocritical or you feel a hypocritical reaction in yourself. So for example, it's perfectly okay for me to speak to someone of the opposite sex, even though I'm in a relationship, but I don't want my partner to speak to someone of the opposite sex. Just, I'm just giving you an example from my perspective of my kind of hypocrisy. And I can watch it and I can non-judgmentally go, you know what, that's not a good place to be in. I can't necessarily change it by snapping my fingers, but the awareness of it. So the hypocrite becomes useful because he becomes a kind of diviner and an informer of what is going on, because we will have to deal with people like that in our lives. And if we just go, la, 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 I don't want to deal with it, oh no, they have control over us.
Yeah, I will say that, again, going back to your descriptions of the archetypes, none of them were written in a way to be seen as positive or negative. I didn't feel.
Exactly. I've tried that. Yeah.
Yeah, well, you did a very good job of that. I
Thank
found
you.
it interesting because I have reactions to certain words, but the reaction that I expected to see in there wasn't there. It was all just description,
Right.
And sort of a personification almost of that idea. So,
well, I think I probably have had enough practice over the years through doing my own books that when it came to doing this, plus I think I have a sort of somewhat healthy disregard for sentimentality or simplistic views. So I tried not to plug into the sort of the standardized way of approaching things, but to try and step back a couple of places and say, okay, how can I articulate this in a way that it's raw and honest rather than predefined.
Yeah, well, you did a beautiful job for sure. I know there was a comment that I wanted to go back to. Oh, someone said that your deck made them think of the art class that they had with you, I believe. Yes. So,
Yes.
and yeah, oh, the I lost my train of thought and going back and looking at those the comments. I just don't want anyone to.
It's hard to do 3 or 4 things at once.
Absolutely, and I'm very bad at that. But I wanted to make sure that also that, you know, yes, this is a dialogue, but I also wanted for people to feel comfortable to pose any questions. I love that they're making comments,
Sure.
but if they have questions, feel free to
Please do,
type
yeah.
them in so that we can address those. So I noticed with that deck, there were a couple of extra cards because you do often tell the reader to, you know, to dive deeper into yourself, to really
Yeah.
challenge them to be honest and introspective and see what other archetypes they come up with. Do you think there's a possibility in working with this deck, there might be a re-release or a second release of some of the archetypes that maybe other people bring to you in the future?
It's funny. I was actually talking to Llewellyn, the publisher, about exactly this just a couple of weeks ago. Um, on the one hand, it would be fun. On the other, and I wouldn't say Llewellyn have done an absolutely fantastic job, both with the sort of printing, production, everything. I've been deeply impressed. I sort of turned a little sour on mainline publishing over the last 10 years or so, but Llewellyn have been, you know, sort of really brilliant with this. But it's actually not really economically viable to issue a part deck, just in terms of, you know, because I mean, they would need at least at best to break even. And it's just economically, it doesn't really work. It would be different if I did another deck. But right now, it's the last thing in the universe that I need to do is to, I would need to have something that I really wanted to say. And I've said it in this one place. But at my tender years, it's an incredibly exhausting process. I mean, you know, doing a 4-day workshop nearly kills me. So you can imagine what putting this together over a period of 2 years. So I'm still on some level sort of yeah, well, you know, you say psychologically recovering from just putting that much out. Which is great.
Understood.
It's great. You know, I'm really happy that I had that to do, and I feel, but it is goddamn exhausting.
I understand. I do. Are a couple of comments that I wanted to go ahead and note here. But I did want to ask you one question before we get to those. We've talked a lot about the fact that you have workshops that you've done. I know that COVID is still very much, you know, something that we have to be aware of. Do you plan to do in-person workshops again in the future?
No, I'm pretty much workshopped out. Probably over a period of 25 years, I've lost count, you know, maybe 250, 300 workshops. And I think I'm pretty much used up. It, I- um, it's a really great experience being in a room with sort of 13, 14 people and being incredibly fully engaged.
Mm-hmm.
But I've noticed as the years have passed, it takes me longer to actually recover at the end of that period. So and now it takes me so long, and I kind of I don't want to do it unless I've got my full capacity to be attentive. And I think I'm probably past that point. So in a way, the Archeo was also my way of saying, well, here it is. This is the best I know.
Yeah.
That said, I am working on a book at the moment, which who knows whether I ever will get it out or just simply release it in a limited edition because I don't want to fight with publishers. But it's called Wozniak, and it's basically the best of, rather than leaving it for somebody else to put together when I die. I've actually basically just picked my favorite 150 pictures and the best 150 things I've ever said, I think. And I put it into a book called Wozniak. And the reason I called it Wozniak was because about 20 years ago, after Griffin and Sabine had hit its height and things started to calm down and I wasn't in the newspapers and on telly and all that all the time, I was sitting in a restaurant and a guy sitting just over from me suddenly gets up, comes over, and he looks at me straight in the eye and he says, "Weren't you Nick Bantock?" And I turned and I said, "Yes, I was Nick." And so that's how Wozniak got born. So Wozniak is my way of saying, "Oh, damn, my filters are all gone. I don't give a care. I don't give a damn anymore. I just say what I feel like."
That's awesome. Thank you for that story. I do have one person who wanted to tell you a profound experience that they had with the Archeo. And so I would encourage that person to go ahead and write it out so that we can read it aloud on here. And then there was another fellow who had a question for you. It says, were you aware of Plato's Symposium and the idea of twin flames when you wrote Griffin and Sabine?
I'd heard of that, as I'd heard of many things, but I'm not an academic. I'm experiential. I come from a fine arts painting background. I tend to work from my own experiences, my own ideas, and the images tend to come before the words. So whilst I've read all my life and I'm interested in concepts, I tend not to try and make anything happen from something that I've read or thought. I tend to try and allow ideas to evolve from the image outwards. If you think about it, our society is so word-based that we have a tendency to always assume that an image is an illustration of the word. You know, it makes the art, the illustration, subservient by nature. And so I've tried to come at it from the other way so that I allow images stroke. And when I say dream life, I don't mean that literally my dreams, but my experience of the world in an image sense way. I try to let that be more the driving force. So my books and my ideas tend to, so for example, in a way, you could say the parrot that appeared on the front of Griffin and Sabine was really where it began. You know, and the parrot, there's an expression in England where I grew up, when someone's sick as a parrot, it means they're fed up with their life. I'm sick as a parrot. I'm fed up with my life. So that was the sick baby parrot. And when he started to speak, then out of somewhere comes, if you talk in terms of the anima and the animus, then comes the response. And the response is Sabine. So I'm sitting there with the parrot. I'm sitting there with a sudden awareness that there are two people that need to go into dialogue. So instead of saying, well, this is where it's going to begin and this is where it's going to end, my story, I start in the middle and grow that story outwards. So the pictures suggest words, the words suggest pictures, and bit by bit I grow and build it. Now that's a very difficult thing to do if you're, say, have a book contract where people want to know what it is you're doing. I was lucky back in the early 90s to hit the right time and the right place where they trusted me to do it. They took a big risk on me. You wouldn't get a publisher doing that, no.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to have to go back and re-listen to what you stated about the idea of the image, then the words. I have,
Yes.
as a writer, I have a tendency to, I mean, I'm heavily word focused, and I do think I'm also a very visual person. I'm not in the sense that I create art as you do,
Right.
but I like that concept of a means of working and getting out of my own stale perceptions. That's very cool.
Well, if you think about it, particularly as a woman, you are dealing with a language that is essentially male constructed. So you're always wrestling with something that is you're wrestling with something that is not necessarily a home territory. And what I mean by that is, and I'm really polarizing things here, and I'm saying if you look at the feminine and the masculine in their extremes, there is a tendency for the masculine side to be the controlling. And it's much easier to control people through words. Images are much more suited to our intuitive perception. If you go back 50,000 years, we didn't have words, either spoken or written. We saw everything in terms of images, our dream life, our day life, our whole experience. So we have a much older way of perceiving the world through images, but we don't use it most of the time because it's actually threatening to the masculine word control dominant side. So if we are going to actually really come to a better internal balance, we have to allow the images more equality, in the same way that the struggle to get the masculine and the feminine better in balance. We also need to get our pictorial and our vocal into a place where one is not dominating the other.
I love that. I don't even have a response. That's something I'm going to have to chew on. I love that. I do have to apologize to the person who posed the last question that I mentioned.
Okay.
I misread it, and it's
Okay,
they wanted for you to actually share a humbling or profound recent experience with your deck or another deck, if you have one to share.
Yeah, so you're asking them?
No, they're actually asking you for
okay.
Yes.
Okay. I'm only really just starting to, this may sound weird, but I'm only really just starting to use the deck, to really get into it. When you're creating something, you can't, the duende, the card, the duende is very, very interesting, because for me, the duende represents the creative process at its most full on. It's like the notion that it comes up through the soles of your feet, and it pours through you and it burns through you, and you don't choose what comes out, you merely watch and observe. So when I was creating it, it felt, I wish I could say it felt like that all the time. It didn't, but some of the time it felt like that's what was pouring out of me. So now that it's complete, it's almost like the first time I actually get to sit back and go, okay, how does this work for me? And so, but going back a little, I want to answer the question, but not directly. I hope this person understands what I'm getting at. So if they want a real life experience, it goes back to the notion of when did I first really come to understanding the potential of archetypes to help me within my own life. You know, the cards to some extent are just a secondary reflection. So back many years ago, my son, my first child, isn't quite born. It's in his mother's stomach, and I've intellectually accepted the idea of this life, this life that I'm about to be involved with as it comes forth. And I put my hand on one night, I put my hand on her stomach and it kicks me. And suddenly I go from intellectually understanding it to viscerally understanding it. And what I understand is that the life is real. But at the same time, that has a domino effect on me. So if the life is real, then I'm not immortal, as I always imagined myself to be, but that I am mortal and I am going to die. And it scared the crap out of me. You know, on some deep level, I was petrified. And I had, over the next couple of days, a massive anxiety attack. And eventually, when I could sort of get out the house, very wobbly, I went to see an acupuncturist. I'd already got the appointment booked, and I was talking to him about what was going on with me. And he said, he used the expression, your armor has got a hole in it. You know, you're going to need to re-armor yourself. And I was trying to understand what he meant by that. And he said, you need to surround yourself with the characters and the part of you that will re-protect you. And being a very pictorial person, I took that away and I took it literally. And I started to imagine myself traveling along, but building around me these various characters who would protect me from this feeling that I was exposed and getting hurt on a regular basis. But more than anything, I was petrified of dying. And as I started to build these characters in my head and internally, I started to feel better. I started to feel like I could cope with the world again. So I went from that sort of almost disbelief place, pictorially constructing something that actually gave me a real sense of defense against the harshness of the world. So when it comes to the cards, one of the ways you can actually help yourself in the similar process is if you pick whether you do it blind or open, you pick your key card, you put it down in the center, you say, that is me, this is where I am, what do I need? What help do I require? So you put one card to the east on the right. And that card for me, I'm not telling anyone how to do it, but that card represents the immediate need of my masculinity. What does my masculine side need? My masculine side is very good at pushing and taking, not very good at relaxing and accepting. So what does that side need? So the first card I put on the right represents that. The first card I put on the left represents the female. And then I put a card above, and that is, where am I moving forward to? And then I put a card underneath, and that represents, what do I need as a backup behind me? It's a very simple structure of 5 cards, but within that structure, you get to see not just where you are, but you also get to see what you need around you to help you move forward in a way that you're not in a state of fear or panic.
That's beautiful. And you've used this with your deck?
Oh yeah, yes. I mean that was the first one I started to use myself on a sort of a regular basis. And what's interesting is, like Jung said, that what fascinated him more than anything about the tarot was how every time he went back, the last experience seemed to flow into the next. It's almost like he was listening to a continual story of himself on this journey. And the more he observed that, the more he understood about the personal mythology and the internal experience as opposed to the day-to-day external experience.
Yeah.
I hope that helps the person who asked the question. That's as close as I can to saying something that really hit me hard.
Yeah, and I love that you gave us an other way of working with the deck itself, and I'm sure that a lot of people will enjoy that. We did have somebody say that they feel that your deck is a much needed interjection to a cultural climate currently. So they're thanking you for that.
I hope so. Yeah, I mean, that you wouldn't put down to me. You would just be that if I'm a creature of my time, I happen to be in the appropriate place at the appropriate time. Try not to take that stuff on board. Like, I learned that 30 odd years ago. The moment you start letting people saying, gee, I like what you do, once you start to take that on board, it becomes a destructive rather than a positive. So you have to take it all with a pinch of salt. And the way you do that is say, I'm just the vehicle through which it passes.
Absolutely, absolutely. That's the way I approach my readings with people too. Is that like I'm just a conduit for spirit.
Yeah,
So.
yeah.
Another person asks, are any of your past workshops recorded so that they can be released online?
No, for very good reason that they are highly personal. What goes on in the workshop stays in the workshop. One of the agreements that we make with the people in the workshop is you do not repeat anything because it needs to be a safe place. So whatever goes on, unless if you want to say something that happened to somebody else, you need to check it out with them first before you tell anyone. That's the only way that you can build a real security net, and that's why my workshops were never predetermined. I did do a book quite a few years ago now called The Trickster's Hat, which was a series of 49 exercises in terms of writing and art and other things. And the Trickster's Hat was designed so that people could actually do their own workshop at home with a little bit of support of me, the trickster.
Oh, that's wonderful. You're going to see that it's going to be hard to get all of these other books that you put out after
Well,
this.
most of them are now out of print. So yeah, you do have to dig around. You won't be able to walk into a new bookshop and get them.
Excellent. Well, I will definitely be looking for that one because anything that helps to facilitate the deeper dive into ourselves and better understanding is hugely important. The same person who asked about Plato's Symposium also was remarking about how that we're driven by images, and he was talking about hieroglyphics. And
Yes.
yeah, and actually most of the earliest writing systems are idiomatic. So,
Yes, exactly. And that's that makes complete sense about how we functioned.
yeah.
I mean, we've moved to a more abstract state. The more language was actually used as a political tool, I mean that in the broadest sense, whether it be through religion or king and country, the more it got used as a means to actually get people to do what certain other people wanted them to do. The more it moved away from the individual's capacity to think for themselves, and the more it actually moved to, I mean, poetry saves that, right? Literature saves us from that. But most language that we encounter is actually a means to actually control.
I'm going through all of its comments.
Sure.
The same fellow also says that this conversation, the words you've used today, have been more inspiring for him than he actually imagined. So
Good.
there's been a lot of really great response. Let me see. So everyone is really excited about. And yes, the description that you gave about how that you have used the deck was, the fellow says that it actually helped him a great deal to understand better. So
Good. Within the booklet that comes with the card, there is I've described a short version, a medium size, and a long version of layouts. And again, they're just suggestions. I really encourage people to adapt these to their own needs.
yeah, absolutely. I think that, having the outline is always great. And then being able to, the more that we work with a tool, the more that we better understand how to use that tool artfully. A lot of people are saying that The Trickster's Hat was a great book and that they've used it in art groups, and how that they
Good.
have really, that it has been a very helpful tool for them as well. So are there any, we have about 8 minutes left. I want to make sure that if there are any, we can go over time, but I want to be respectful of your space as well. If anyone had any questions to ask, please try to get those in quickly or very soon. And you
I did want to throw one thing out there.
Yes, please.
This is the artwork that I did the finished artwork I've kept, but in order, when I was first working it out, I did a complete set of 40 graphite drawings on a small scale. And to make those accessible, I've actually started to put those up on in my Etsy shop. I keep the price down really cheap because I would like them to go, and I would like people to have them. So I just letting people know that if they want to go to my Etsy store because they've got a particular card that they identify with, and they actually want the original rough drawing of it, it's there. And that's all I'm saying.
Oh, wonderful. So your Etsy shop, can we find the link for that on your personal Instagram page?
Just go to Bantock or Nick Bantock, and it's easy enough to find.
Okay, excellent.
Just go to Etsy and put my name in, and they'll come across it.
Yeah, I will be tagging your personal page when I upload this to Instagram, and then I will find your Etsy in order to add to the YouTube links.
Great.
Additionally, I was wondering, I know we can go through Llewellyn to purchase the actual deck. Can we also do that through the Etsy shop?
No, I don't have personal copies. It's best to go through. I mean, I encourage people to go directly to independent bookstores. Just email them, call them up, and order it. I'm really very. I mean, it's great that you get sort of the opportunity, people in out of the way places, to use Amazon when they can't use anything else. But I'd much rather see small companies, small bookshops being supported. So, if you're prepared to maybe wait, 1 day or 2 days longer to get it, then keep your independent bookstore going. They need to get supported.
I agree. I love that you said that, because there are a lot of there's been so many that have struggled as a result of the pandemic, and so we have a number of different questions that have come up. Someone asked if they can write to you and send you art.
The best way is see my Facebook page, and then personal message me. And then if I feel comfortable and that they're not going to bite my leg off or, sort of haunt me from here to eternity, then I'll give them my email and we can just go from there.
Beautiful.
I've had to be a little bit, you can imagine over
Oh,
the
yes.
years, it's like you have to protect yourself a little bit.
Absolutely. It's an interesting world, and we have to protect our energy for sure.
Yeah, I once had Jack the Ripper stalking me, so.
Someone said, thank you for touching our conscious and our subconscious. Another person asks if it was a dream, or did they read that Griffin and Sabine will be made into a film?
The current situation there is that yes, the option is seriously being moved forward on, not as a film, but hopefully the pilot has initially been written, although we're not at the stage where the network has thrown a bunch of money at it, but hopefully that's the next step. But yes, in the ideal world, we will actually see it down the road as a rather large TV experience. Because part of the problem of getting the film had passed through many options since 1991, but it was almost like it was almost impossible for Hollywood to put it into a 100-minute movie. Now, with people like HBO and Showtime, it's much more viable to take something on like this. So it doesn't have to be kind of watered down so that it's just a love story, but that it can also be the metaphysical journey, the struggle between good and evil, and all the other layers, that the alchemical layer, all of those layers that made up Griffin and Sabine now have a chance to be sort of unfolded and laid out. So I'm much happier with the idea of it in that form than in a movie.
So would you have a big hand in how that was created?
You don't. I mean, that's not really the way it actually works. I mean, I they come to me, they ask me what I think. I say, and sometimes they listen, but sometimes, I mean, when you look at the kind of money involved and the people who are, wanting to get money back out of it after their investment, you can see that there are many other agendas there, that the person who created the book whilst they may have kicked off the initial idea, it's not going to be that helpful for me to do any more than play a gentle godfather in the background.
Gotcha. Oh, well, I'm so hoping that it happens and that they do it justice. I mean, obviously, whenever we create the world in our head as we're reading it and experiencing, because you don't just read those books, you experience them.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
when we're experiencing them, we always build these images and connection to it. So nothing ever is going to be quite like that, but I'm really hoping that will be an enjoyable experience.
Yeah, so I mean, every now and again you see something and you go, that feels, it's not identical, but it feels honest to the intent. I think, the first couple of series of Game of Thrones, for example, was honest to the intent. Yes. And not necessarily nuts about where it eventually, but it was. And so when you see something like that, it's so much more satisfying than, say, you watch something and you go, well, that was not my experience when I read the book, and go away, leave me alone.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We do have a request from somebody who wanted to know if you would ever do a personal reading or communication with someone using your deck.
Thank you. I think it's very very kind to want that, but no, I'm not going down that path. That's this is really me throwing this out there and saying it's up to you to work with. Now, there's no reason why two or more people shouldn't get together and help and facilitate one another. But I do not want to be the definitive voice. I have merely kick-started this. I've thrown a few sparks out there. Somebody else can, take the bellows to the fire.
Gotcha. So you've created a platform that we can then personally interact with.
Yes, exactly.
And someone kindly went to Etsy and found it's Bantock art on Etsy. That's the name of it.
Thank you.
Another person said they love the drabbles in the back of the Archeo.
I'm glad someone knows what they're called. The drabbles are 100-word stories. I've been writing 100-word stories for years now. I love them because they really sharpen and exercise one's preciseness of words. It's the whole point about these drabbles is it has to be exactly 100 words. And that's what makes it really fun and at the same time incredibly difficult to tell a whole story in 100 words. I've actually got another book in the pipeline, which may or may not come, which is 100 100-word dark stories.
Oh, I like that. I don't think I've never tried that exercise before.
Oh, try it. You'll have it's hard, but it's incredibly satisfying. You when you've got 116 and you've got to get it down and it drives you nuts, and suddenly you find you're down to 98 and you've got 2 spare words. You get so excited about what you can do with them.
That's fantastic. So it's basically like 2 paragraphs, roughly.
Pretty much, yeah. I mean, it's nothing, but you know what? You really can tell an awful lot if you create it that other people have to fill in the spaces.
Nice. Yeah, it inspires the reader too.
Try it.
I definitely will. I'm looking. Oh no. I'm looking to see all of these. Someone wants to know if you've considered doing a pre-recorded masterclass.
Again, you know what? I'm not. It's formulated, and in the same way that I talked about allowing the words to come from the images and vice versa. When I sit in a room doing a workshop with a group of people, I have a series of tools to work with, but I'm reacting to the people in 2 things. I'm reacting to each individual person in the room at that moment, and I'm also relating to the group as a body within itself. So all of the decisions I make and the things I have to say are based on what's going on in the here and now. So a masterclass would just be a series of how-tos, and not only do I not think I'm very good at that, I actually don't think it's that useful.
Gotcha. So it's a dynamic experience that is unique to the group that you are with.
Exactly. It's interactive. It's like when you're in front of an audience, and you're doing a reading. It shouldn't be the same every night. It should change to the nature of the people in the room. You be aware of them, you react to them, you see what and hear what makes them laugh, what makes them cry, and you try and feed that in the most positive way. But if you can't see anybody and you can't respond to them, then it's just a stream of consciousness.
Yeah, that makes sense. Absolutely. Neon Grave writes, "Thank you for your personal diligence for growth and art. You have been a confidant, therapist, and a friend."
Thank you. I really appreciate this. It makes the bloody slog worthwhile.
Another person wants to know if there's a chance the play will run again in Victoria.
I don't think so, but I would hope that the play would run again somewhere else. We recently had an inquiry from Portland, so maybe after with completely through COVID, that it would be really nice, because we put a lot into, and I was very happy with the outcome of that play. The Belfry in Victoria did a great job, and everyone involved, and it's also a play that is it's not complicated. You got a couple of actors, and that's it.
I think I lost the sound. Have we lost you? I think you froze up a bit. Oh no. I had a couple more things. Well, I hope that we have not lost you entirely. Um, Unfortunately, it looks like we have lost Nick. This has been a really wonderful conversation. We lost Wozniak. Anyway, this has been beautiful. I want to read a couple of these comments out loud so that people can go ahead and so that when he goes back to view this, he'll be able to. The comments are typically lost, so I want to make sure that he's able to see them. There's so many. You guys have been so interactive. It's been beautiful. So the Impossible Garden says, "Dear Nick, your art has helped me through life itself. Thank you, thank you, thank you." I couldn't agree more. There were moments that, yes, that I treasure, and they have marked very important spaces in my world. It should be a different experience anyway. The book experience with the letters is such an intimate, unique experience. I agree. That phenomenal. And you're talking about the difference between movie versus the actual books. Somebody asked me to describe Griffin and Sabine to them when I was telling them that Nick was going to be on my show, and I said it is an experience. It's not just a book; it's an experience. Susan Boland, you did one of his writing workshops and loved it. That is wonderful. Nick is the Phil Collins of art, everyone. But the book, do the work and it will become a part of you. So yes, thanks for my beautiful drawing. And then hi to Joyce. I just got to meet Joyce earlier today via video. She's a lovely woman. I know it is just like losing your twin. It's been great. Oh, thank you. I'm so glad you guys were here, but thanks for writing all of your beautiful comments. And, Melissa Santazo, you said, thank you for awakening of your art. And everyone, this has been wonderful. I really appreciate you all being here. Nick, you are amazing and wonderful, and you've opened our eyes to many different ideas. So this is going to be a wonderful video to have online. It's going to be archived in the IGTV. And thank you all so much for being present. You can feel free to check it out again and again.